How much equipment do you need to shoot a simple video? Not this much. But it's like building hot rods. Shooting good video is fascinating and powerful, actually. So that's called an establishing shot, and it gives people an idea of where the story begins, and that's the first kind of shot that's really helpful. And it can be a wide shot, normally wider. In fact, here's one that works really good, coming into your garage from the back alley or whatever. If you had a drone, you could do a real nice aerial shot. Forget that for now. And then that also kind of hooks the story, right? So come through the door with arms full of equipment, and then you kind of know where we're going with this video. And the next one you need to think about is how you're going to hook people into the story, engage them into what you want to show in this week's, this day's video, whatever it may be. And that's what the armload of equipment does, okay? That hooks you into the story. It lets you know what's going to happen, not just where it's going to happen. Here's another one coming through the door, same door, with a drive shaft that Rock Auto sent me because we're going to lengthen the drive shaft for the '06 Cadillac. It's just a good way to start the story and get people engaged. And then the third shot is the talking head shot, or if you got two people talking heads, and that's the shot you're looking at right now. And it's just, you know, a good way to narrate or to give instructions or to make friends. And don't be afraid to show your face, right? Or let us hear your voice. I mean, there's nothing worse than those tacky videos where it's, you know, some kind of computer reading the text, and then you never see the guy's face. Can I trust what this guy's saying? He doesn't even show me his face. Then the next one that's important is the wide shot, so that we can see what's going on. This is a problem if you're using a device, but we'll get into that in a second. I like this one. Put my iPad up on the shelf where the compressor hangs near the ceiling and just put it on wide angle and take a picture, leave it running while I'm doing a bunch of work. It gives you an aerial view and you can kind of see things. You know what's really interesting? People always want to know what's around you. They actually want to know what kind of welder you're using, what brand of tools, electric tools you use, or what, you know, they just want to learn all this stuff, and people need stuff to notice. So the wide shot does that. It gives people things to notice that you don't have to talk about. And the next one would be the pan shot. That is where you want a close look at something that's fairly big, so you pan across it and you see it a little bit at a time. That's a great effect, you know, and it gives people a sense of dimension and expanse in what you're working on. Okay, then the next shot would be the detail shot. And that's where you take a fairly close, well, it can be actually a macro even, but a close shot of something that you're explaining about. So, you know, I'm working on this car fender or whatever, and I can be standing here talking to you about this fender or about welding or whatever, and then I throw in a detail shot that you can actually see what's going on. Now, the other approach, of course, is to just have the camera shoot you and everything together, but you don't get the detail then. So it's good to have this imposed detail shot that lets people see close up what you're working on. And that brings us to the macro shot. The neat thing about cameras is you can see stuff that you normally wouldn't see. So I love this. Here's a macro of a weld. I'm welding on this Cadillac frame. And it's a real close-up shot, just like macro. And then I've also got this super macro setting on my lens so that I can show you things like almost microscopic things like the thickness of this steel. Actually, it's a bit gross, isn't it? And another good shot is what I would call the information shot. And you see this a lot of times, and it's frustrating in videos because what kind of gasket glue is that you're using? What kind of paint is that you're using? Just take a still shot of the can, of the label on the can, and then put it onto the timeline as you're editing. And then people can, because the neat thing about YouTube is you can stop and go back and look at that, or even take a screenshot of it, and then you've got that information. The other way is to put the information in the description, but I'd rather just see it in the picture than have to search through the description, especially if you've got a whole lot of stuff in there. And on that note, other things that you can add in your timeline in post-production is slides and text and all kinds of things that are just really helpful, because the more you can reinforce what you're trying to show or what you're trying to teach or share, whatever, the more you can reinforce that with other aspects, with other graphics and other pictures and things, the more powerful it'll be. And then here's a fun one where you can just let your creativity go wild, and that is the transition shot. Okay, I love doing these. They're just kind of fun. They take a few minutes. Okay, so here's one with the welding helmet. I put my welding helmet down, and then you see me working in the lens of the welding helmet. And there's just a whole lot of things you can do. Doors opening and closing, use your garage door, you know, you open your garage door and there you are standing outside talking, or, you know, whatever. And those are transitions from one type of a shot or one subject matter into the next one. I mean, normally there would be, you know, like in video editing programs, there's like a fade or a wipe or a swipe or a blast or whatever it is. But these kind of like self-made ones are really intriguing and interesting. And you could do it with tools. You notice that in my lower thirds, my subtitles and stuff, I've got a welder burning across the screen, or a grinder in the intro and the extra of these videos. And I just did that in the dark, right, with the camera going, and in the dark weld so that you don't see the background. And then you can key that out, right, with a Luma key actually, so it cuts out everything black and just leaves what's light. And you can just superimpose that thing over top of whatever. I mean, you could use that for a transition, you know, just blow up the thing.
Oh, do you want toasted bacon and tomato sandwich or eggs and bacon?
I don't know, what would you go for? Yeah, let's do the sandwich.
Okay, broadcasting now.
Personally, I use an iPad and a program called LumaFusion, which is a $30 program in Canada, an app. And you don't have to do Premiere Pro, Final Cut, any of those kind of things. It's overboard, it's overkill for doing these kind of YouTube videos. And the other thing is you don't need to go to high resolution, all right? So I shoot everything in 1080p, right, which is the widescreen version, right, the digital version that works good on your computer or whatever, whoever's watching it on what. And also it is not a huge file, so it's quicker to upload to YouTube and it's quicker to download. And of course, YouTube will give you several options to play back at 780p or whatever it is, 420 or whatever, and it goes down and down until all you are is a bunch of pixels, right? But 1080p is a really clear picture. In fact, you can broadcast that on your flat screen TV or whatever, and it still looks okay. Now, a bunch of different ways to shoot, just simply using a tripod. This camera that you're looking at, or that I'm looking at you in, is on a tripod. I've actually got, I think, 3 of these little cheap tripods. They're, you know, 90 bucks in Canada. What's that? 30 bucks in the US? and they'll do anything you want. They're good for the little cameras that we use. And it's amazing what you can do handheld if you know, have a good pair of running shoes on and it's smooth and soft so that you're not clunking, and then just learn a few motions. And zoom would normally mean that you turn this lens to zoom in. Okay, that's really hard to do to get it smooth as you're videoing. So the best way to do it is to set your camera where you want it to end, and then 2 hands on the camera, and you just zoom like this. I do have a gimbal because I use it for other things. I probably won't use it much for this car business, but that's a smooth way to run around somewhere if you're trying to get a moving shot, and you can get some amazing shots with a gimbal. And it'll just take these little cameras and it'll keep them smooth and steady as you run through the shop, dive through the car, I don't know, whatever you're gonna do. Now there's another one that works really good, and that is mounting the camera on something that's moving. Okay, so here's the camera mounted on the side bumper of my Jeep going through a river, right? It just gives you that GoPro kind of a feel, right? Where there's some action happening, but the camera is connected to the mass of whatever it is. Rather than watching the Jeep drive, it's actually connected to the Jeep and it's looking out more like you were a person in the Jeep. But here's one, let's try this. Let's put this camera, I'll just use the regular digital camera, on a tripod, and we'll stick it on the roof of the car and tape it so it doesn't fall, okay? Because I've got this car on a winch, right, that lifts, like a gantry crane, that lifts up and down. So if we stick it up there and then point the camera down and then run the winch up and down, it'll be like you're sitting on top of the car watching the guy below run the winch. Well, that's a cool shot. All right. Or you can hand hold your camera and you can walk around, you can move everywhere and talk and show things. And all right, I'm on it, honey. And so this is handy too when you're working and you're taking somebody somewhere. All right, I can take you around to the front of the car, show you something here, show you something. There's nothing there, man. His car's all cut apart. All there is a few braces left. Anyway, that's handy. And it's a little more activity, right? Like it's kind of the vlog type of a shot. Now there's another one that's kind of fun. And this is a little $50 Chinese thing off of Amazon. And basically, you mount the camera on it, and with a little remote control, it'll buzz back and forth along the floor or whatever. And actually, I find that it works really nice if you put it on a piece of glass. So here's the old windshield out of my 29 Dodge. And I can run it on that piece of glass, and it just is smooth as glass. And so you get a good shot that way. And this is a welding shot with that. And people might not notice that they'd say, hey, that guy's using a slider. No, a lot of people would never notice, but it does give it a really kind of a professional look for not a whole lot of effort. And you just throw one of those in once in a while. Another thing I've got is this little, just a piece of round steel that I cut and out of 18 gauge and put a 1/4x20 thread in the middle of it and put a little ball thing on top, set the camera on top of there. And in fact, that very first shot in my intro is this thing sitting on the floor with the camera on the floor. And you could actually like measure your axles to make sure you got enough clearance and mount your camera on here and put it in the middle of the back alley or the highway or whatever and drive over. You get a shot of your car going right over the camera. That'd be cool, wouldn't it? This one here, just a clamp handy thing because it, a lot of times you're just thinking, man, if I could just get an angle on this bead roller or this English wheel or whatever and show this little process, yeah, this will work with fairly light cameras. So let's talk about cameras. What do you really need? Actually, you don't need much. This here is my wife's old iPhone. Yeah, these work, you know, you could take some good video with them. Because this thing here, you could actually put it in places where you can't get a camera, you know, like laying down on the ground or whatever, you know, like in your pocket. And the camera on the back of these, wherever that is, somewhere there, is always higher quality than the one on the front. But, you know, if you get like a high-end, particularly iPhone, that's the only one I'm familiar with. I don't have one. I don't actually use a phone. But the newer ones, they have amazing cameras. Now I have a similar camera in my iPad, this iPad here. It's got two wide angle cameras on the back side here, and they're pretty good quality. But that's the bare minimum, okay, is the mobile phone. And then the other thing you would want to have with it for absolute sure is a microphone that plugs into it. The trick with a microphone is the closer it is to your mouth, the better sound you'll get. Now these ones set the volume automatically, and it's probably not that bad when you're up close, but it does have that kind of a tinny, ringy sound to it, so you want to get a mic. But whatever camera you're using, you want to get a mic, okay? So the cameras that I use, and I happen to have two of them, obviously, because I'm shooting each other with it, and that is this little Canon M50. Now, Canon and Sony are probably the most popular ones continually, but there's other ones. Panasonic actually has a pretty amazing camera. And yeah, there's a lot of them. But I just stick with Canon simply because I've been using Canon for the last, I don't know, half of my life. And I like to be able to use the lens. When I get a new camera, I can use the old lenses on them. Okay, so this one comes as a kit camera in Canada. Right now it's $700. Used to be $650. And it's got a little 15 to 45 millimeter zoom lens on it. So they're zoomed in all the way, and they're zoomed out all the way, okay? So that's the 15 millimeter, and that's the 45 millimeter. And it's not a bad lens, but one thing you'll notice about this lens, which brings us to how to shoot, and that is this car will be in focus here from the back all the way over there to the garage door. And in fact, if you're shooting with a iPhone or, you know, a device like this, or an iPad or whatever, a tablet, you're going to be shooting a long depth of field. Now, if you'll notice the camera, this camera right here, that my face is in focus and the car is out of focus. Okay, that's done on purpose. And this is the same Canon camera, M50, with a Sigma 30 millimeter lens, like a portrait lens. And the beauty of that is it opens up, lets a lot of light in. This one here is not so good in the dark. And, but you need a camera anyway, you know? It's so good to do like family pictures and vacation pictures and all kinds of stuff like that. I use this one a lot in the garage for shooting things because if I wreck this lens, I'm not worried. Another thing you really got to watch out for is the welding and grinder sparks, any kind of sparks around any kind of glass. I just keep my iPads clear. But for these little Canon cameras, I'll cover the LCD display with a glass cover and I use a UV filter or clear glass filter on the front of the lens. Now, every time you buy a camera, buy a lens, buy a UV filter to go on top of that lens so the lens doesn't get scratched. And I just use this one, this 15 to 45 lens right here that I'm looking at for the close-ups in welding and grinding and that kind of thing. And then just buy a bunch of filters that fit, because you can buy one filter for $15, or if you go on one of those Chinese websites, you can get a box of 10 for $15. But always protect your glass and your cars as well. If you're welding or grinding near another car, make sure you put a car cover over it. All right, let me talk about the audio then for the other cameras. So these ones here, they'll have a built-in microphone, a little tiny hole somewhere there. It works like a cell phone microphone, you know. Yeah, not really usable, all right? And so this is a good thing to have. This is a Rode, I don't know what it is, shot mic anyway, for a camera. I don't think you can get this model anymore, but they're, you know, they're a couple $100, and you plug that in to your camera and you've got really high-end, high-quality sound. Okay, let me just give you a little demo here of this microphone mounted on the camera, and you can hear that it's actually a very good sound, very solid sound. The only problem is that if you're moving away, farther away, the worse it gets and the more ambient noise it's going to pick up. But I wouldn't necessarily buy this one for shooting your how-to project video. What I would go with is the one you're listening to right now, and that's a lapel mic stuck right on here. The wireless pack is on top of the camera there, and again plugged into the side, the microphone input into camera, and that it basically talks to this one right here, which is stuck to my belt and connected to this little mic. The great thing about this is that the audio is not going to change and be affected by things on the outside so much. So even if the furnace comes on, you can still hear me. I could crawl into the car and you can still hear me. I can walk outside and you can still hear me. I can go anywhere. Actually, this thing here, this outfit here is actually a Sennheiser brand. And it's a professional television production microphone. You don't need to go that heavy and hot. You could just go with there's a Rode, it's called a Rode Go, which is just a tiny little wireless mic, and that would be a good one. I don't have one, I haven't tested it out, but they seem to be really good. I think they're $300 or $400. And then there's a lot of others. There's a Ceramonic one that's cheaper yet. But the key to good audio is to use a good mic and have it close to your mouth. The better audio that you can put in, the better audio that they're going to get out on the other end. And then putting all the pieces together, and this can be very time consuming, but what I do is I use an iPad with this LumaFusion app on it, an iPad Pro, and I will do a shoot like this, and then I'll go into the house and I'll download the SD cards into the iPad. And then later this afternoon, when my wife says, honey, can you take me shopping? And I'll just sit in the truck and edit as she's doing her shopping and get a lot done like that. And we'll go 4 or 5 places, whatever, you know, she's a woman, right? And so I'll just sit in the truck and edit. I remember when my dad used to do that, it drove me crazy. I said, Dad, why don't you just go in with Mom? Like, you know, he's sitting in the truck waiting for her. But he didn't have an iPad, see? He just sat there and stared into the space. I don't know. Now, there are guys that just shoot. In fact, you know, there's YouTube channels where the guys just holding his iPhone or whatever, and he shoots the whole thing and he just uploads it. But it depends on how engaging you want to be. So let's talk about the elements of the segments or the parts that you need to put together, okay? So we started with some of the shots, like the establishing shot, and then the wide shot, the detail shot, the close-up shot, the talking head shot, all of those things, macro shots, all of those things that bring in a lot of media, including the slides and the lower thirds, the text and those things that you can add. That all brings together a lot of different angles and perspectives, which is really handy. But you need to kind of map out your program, right, from beginning to end. So start with an intro, make your intro really, really short and catchy, and make it so that people recognize when they hear that sound. It's like a television program, you know, a TV show comes on and you know what it is even from the other room, right? Because of the commonality of the intro all the time. Okay, so they got the intro, and then you've got to have the hook or the engaging shot. Start the story with something that lets people know what they can expect to receive or to see or to hear during this segment. Cherry red is nothing but a dream. But you want to see what it looks like when I'm dreaming about it? And then I try to make it like a story so that there's a story to be told. Because when you're doing patching fenders, like seriously, how many videos can you make about patching body panels and people are still going to be engaged? Well, you can make a ton of them if they're all about something different. So figure out ahead of time what you want to, and I've just got a list on my iPad. I wake up at night thinking about this stuff, and so I'll just turn over and open my iPad and I'll write down, you know what, I'm going to do an episode on some certain story, some certain storyline. And it might not have anything to do with the part of the car that I'm working on, but you can integrate those together and make it really interesting and people will want to follow and get connected. One of the challenges is, you know, you can make a 45-minute video of you patching a fender, but people aren't going to watch for 45 minutes. And when I see that, I scroll through if it's something I really want to learn, but there's no way I got 45 minutes to do that. And so people don't necessarily want to watch short videos unless it's just entertainment, if it's jokes and that kind of stuff. Just give me 1 minute, minute and a half, you know, a kitty playing the piano thing. But if you really want to engage people, you've got to put out enough information. You've got to have a story that goes from the beginning to the end. So then you do incorporate all of the pieces, and it's important, again, to use all those camera angles to show people what's really going on. Because I can't learn from you if I can't see what you're doing. Be aware of your audience. And another thing, too, is to understand that I'm looking at a glass lens right now, but on the other side, there is you. And you're a real person with a real life, real challenges, real victories, you know, all of that kind of stuff. And that's really what we want to relate to. And I actually started this YouTube channel simply because I was a little frustrated with this whole COVID lockdown thing, not being able to make friends with my neighbors. You know, I've got a friend that lives in, well, let's just say 2,500 kilometers from here. And I was talking to him on Zoom the other day, and I said, you know, I can talk to your neighbor, next door neighbor, just as easily as you can. And it's true, because I can talk to them through YouTube, and that's the only way he can do it right now too. Make your story, make it good, and then make it so that these segments are a little bit predictable, so that people know what to expect. And I always end mine, I don't know if you noticed, but all of my videos I end with one more thing. And I do that on purpose. Every video, I'm on episode 16 or whatever it is right now, and every one of them, you get closer to the end and it's one more thing. And that has to do with the purpose of why I'm making these videos. The truth is, if you want to learn to patch a fender, there's 1,000 videos on YouTube you can go to. And my fender patching is probably not any more excellent than theirs a lot of times. But that's not really the issue. The issue is the connection. And so it's the one more thing. That's the reason. And I would suggest that you stop and think and do a little bit of mental exercise here and figure out what is the reason, really the reason that you're making videos, how-to videos, whether it be building a hot rod or whatever. Is it just for information's sake? It could be. Or is it for making money? Maybe you're monetizing your videos and making some money. That could be too. But deep down behind that, there's a reason why you want to do this rather than doing something else. And for me, that reason is, I almost hate to say this, because once you give it away, it loses its effect. So I'm going to say this and I want you to just totally forget it, okay? the reason that I'm doing this video is because I want to see broken men healthy, marriages healthy and strong, family relationships strong. Okay, now you can forget that, because I'm not going to do that by saying, man, you need to love your wife. I'm going to do it by letting you listen to my wife come on the Google Home thing saying, honey, what do you want for lunch? and you're going to think, man, I wish my wife would do that. Well, she probably does. And if she doesn't, there's something you can do about it. And so that's really the purpose behind me making these videos. I mean, my story is that I came from an extremely broken life, bad broken relationships, you know, suicidal, drunk, pothead kid, to where I got to that point in my life where I was, I think, like 17, 18 years old, couldn't sleep with the light off. I was so afraid. Like, I wasn't afraid of stuff physically. I was one of the first guys in Canada to own a hang glider and jump off of mountains, you know. I loved that kind of stuff, motocross racing and that kind of thing, and going fast. But scared of the dark, because weird things would happen at night. Scary things would happen at night. And so I got to the point where, you know, it was suicide or what? What was the other choice? And I prayed that prayer, you know, the one that the guy prays when his airplane motors quit and, and he's going to crash. And he says, God, if you get me out of this, I'll do whatever you want me to do. I'll go to Africa as a missionary. But I prayed a prayer like that, and it was just simply, God, if there is a God, you need to do something for me here. And the reason I did that isn't because I had like a Christian background or anything, or a religious background. It was simply because I knew full well that the devil was so real because of the torment in my life. And so then I prayed that prayer, and then of course, miracles happened. All heaven broke loose, and that's a long story. But I ended up, not long after that, marrying a beautiful woman, and then having some amazing kids, and then adopting a whole bunch more amazing kids. And life just unfolded to the point where I'm so thankful for the life that I have and the things that I have in my life, that I have no choice but to recognize that there is a God in heaven, that He shines on those who call out to Him, and that He blesses, and, you know, yeah, that's the word, blesses those who have a heart that's upright before Him. And so really the purpose of me making these videos is I just want men everywhere to realize you don't have to live a broken life. You don't have to have a broken marriage. You don't have to have broken relationships with your kids. And you say, well, what does that have to do with hot rods? Oh, it has a lot to do with hot rods. And you could go back and listen to episode 1 where I introduced, just in 5 minutes, the whole concept of this video. But okay, so that's my point, is that you need to know where you're going. You need to know why you're doing this. You need to know what you're doing. And then you can focus on how to do that effectively. Then again, I just do it with telling stories. And I've got a million stories backed up here that I want to tell. And I'm going to tell it all around patching fenders, rebuilding motors, painting cars, sanding, all that kind of stuff. So I'm just really glad that you're connected. And I want you to subscribe, okay, please. Because I'm not getting anything for this. I'm not monetizing this. I don't ever want to make $1 off of this. I'm not, you know, any ads that come up, not from me. I just want to, my purpose is I just want to interact with other guys that are on the same page as me, so that, you know, we can be mutually encouraging. And I'll say that I watch as many, way more, how to build hot rod videos than what I produce. It's not a one-way street, okay? So that's really the goal, and that's really the purpose. So clarify that, okay? Write that down. Write your purpose down. And then, and it's not good to say, oh, this is my purpose, because it can sound so philosophical or whatever, and it just distracts, right? But really, what is going to come across is the story that you tell. And when I start telling stories about how amazing life with Terry is, my wife, or life with my kids is, or life with my grandkids. I mean, how many of you love your grandkids? There's a lot of old guys on there just like me. You love those grandkids. And And so bring them in, bring them onto your program. Now mine have moved away, otherwise we'd be together every day here in the shop. But yeah, it's just the things that are really valuable, the things that are really, really precious. And that has to, for men, that has to be built around something like physical, something where we exercise our to get things done. So subscribe and like these videos, and then you'll keep getting them, keep seeing them. And yeah, and we're going to just encourage each other.